So friends, the New York Times editorial board just published a 6-word headline. And the way I see it, I don't know that 6 truer or more important words have ever been published. Donald Trump is unfit to lead. Let's talk about that, because justice matters. Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here. So friends, the New York Times just published a 5,000-word piece. I promise I'm not going to read it in its entirety here. A 5,000-word piece on why Donald Trump is unfit, why he cannot retake the reins of governmental power. And here is how this lengthy new piece begins. He is dangerous in word, deed, and action. He puts self over country. He loathes the laws we live by. Donald Trump is unfit to lead. By the New York Times editorial board. The editorial board is a group of opinion journalists whose views are informed by expertise, research, debate, and certain long-standing values. The editorial board is separate from the New York Times newsroom. And they present the piece in 5 separate sections. 1, moral fitness matters. 2, principled leadership matters. 3, character matters. 4, a president's words matter. And 5, the rule of law matters. And friends, can I put that last one another way? And you may have heard me say this before. Feel free to say it along with me. Justice matters. Here's how the piece opens. Next week, for the 3rd time in 8 years, Donald Trump will be nominated as the Republican Party's candidate for President of the United States. A once great political party now serves the interests of one man, a man as demonstrably unsuited for the office of president as any to run in the long history of the Republic, a man whose values, temperament, ideas, and language are directly opposed to so much of what has made this country great. The Republican Party once pursued electoral power in service to solutions for such problems, to building the shining city on a hill, as Ronald Reagan liked to say. Its vision of the United States, embodied in principled public servants like George H.W. Bush, John McCain, and Mitt Romney, was rooted in the values of freedom, sacrifice, individual responsibility, and the common good. The party's conception of those values was reflected in its long-standing conservative policy agenda, and today, many Republicans set aside their concerns about Mr. Trump because of his positions on immigration, trade, and taxes. But the stakes of this election are not fundamentally about policy disagreements. The stakes are more foundational. What qualities matter most in America's president and commander-in-chief? Mr. Trump has shown a character unworthy of the responsibilities of the presidency. He has demonstrated an utter lack of respect for the Constitution, the rule of law, and the American people. Instead of a cogent vision for the country's future, Mr. Trump is animated by a thirst for political power, to use the levers of government to advance his interests, satisfy his impulses, and exact retribution against those who he thinks have wronged him. He is, quite simply, unfit to lead. The task now falls to the American people. We urge voters to see the dangers of a second Trump term clearly and to reject it. The stakes and significance of the presidency demand a person who has essential qualities and values to earn our trust, and on each one, Donald Trump fails. And friends, as I say, this is a lengthy piece. I'll put a link to the New York Times article in the description of this video. But what I want to do now is jump right to Section 5 about how the rule of law matters. And I want to quote it at some length, and then we'll talk about it on the other side. The rule of law matters. The danger from these foundational failings of morals and character, of principled leadership and rhetorical excess is never clearer than in Mr. Trump's disregard for the rule of law, his willingness to do long-term damage to the integrity of America's systems for short-term personal gain. As we've noted, Mr. Trump's disregard for democracy was most evident in his attempt to overturn the results of the 2020 election and to encourage violence to stop the peaceful transfer of power. What stood in his way were the many patriotic Americans at every level of government who rejected his efforts to bully them into complying with his demands to change the election results. Instead, they followed the rules and followed the law. This respect for the rule of law, not the rule of men, is what has allowed American democracy to survive for more than 200 years. In the 4 years since losing the election, Mr. Trump has become only more determined to subvert the rule of law, because his whole theory of Trumpism boils down to doing whatever he wants without consequence. Americans are seeing this unfold as Mr. Trump attempts to fight off numerous criminal charges. Not content to work within the law to defend himself, he is instead turning to sympathetic judges, including 2 Supreme Court justices with apparent conflicts over the 2020 election and the January 6th related litigation. The playbook? Delay federal prosecution until he can win election and end those legal cases. His vision of government is one that does what he wants, rather than a government that operates according to the rule of law as prescribed by the Constitution, the courts, and Congress. As divided as America is, people across the political spectrum generally recoil from rigged rules, favoritism, self-dealing, and abuse of power. Our country has been so stable for so long, in part, because most Americans and most American leaders follow the rules or face the consequences. So much in the past 2 decades has tested these norms in our society: the invasion of Iraq under false pretenses, the failures that led to the 2008 financial crisis and the recession that followed, the pandemic, and all the fractures and inequities that it revealed. We need a recommitment to the rule of law and the values of fair play. This election is a moment for Americans to decide whether we will keep striving for those ideals. Mr. Trump rejects them. If he is reelected, America will face a new and precarious future, one that it may not be prepared for. It's a future in which intelligence agencies would be judged not according to whether they preserved national security, but by whether they served Mr. Trump's political agenda. It means that prosecutors and law enforcement officials would be judged not according to whether they follow the law to keep Americans safe, but by whether they obey his, Trump's, demands to go after political enemies. It means that public servants would be judged not according to their dedication or skill, but by whether they show sufficient loyalty to him and his MAGA agenda. Even if Mr. Trump's vague policy agenda would not be fulfilled, he could rule by fear. The lessons of other countries show that when a bureaucracy is politicized or pressured, often the best public servants will run for the exits. This is what has already happened in Mr. Trump's Republican Party, with principled leaders and officials retiring, quitting, or facing ouster. In a second term, he intends to do that to the whole of government. Truer words were never written. And friends, this is a call to action. As a result of Donald Trump capturing the Supreme Court, the court has done his dirty bidding. And they've pretty much guaranteed that none of Donald Trump's other pending criminal cases will go to trial before the November election. But Trump will be judged. He'll be judged by we the people, because we the people have been chosen as the final jury to pass judgment on Donald Trump. And on November 5th, we the jury will vote. And we the jury will find Donald Trump guilty. Because you're damn right the rule of law matters. And because justice matters. Friends, as always, please stay safe, please stay tuned, and I look forward to talking with you all again tomorrow.